Hey, good morning, Sharon. Today we have Sharon Schanzer, the founder of Your Boulder. Really pleased that you could join us today. How are you doing?
I'm great. Thanks for asking. Nice to see you again.
So, are you out of New York City? Is that
Yeah, I'm in
correct?
Manhattan. Yep, New York City. Yeah.
Oh, nice, nice. Well, I'm sure you're having a hot summer up there. So,
Yeah, we just had our first of, I'm sure will be many heat waves, but we have air conditioning, obviously. So, just stay inside. I
yeah,
just was commenting the other day that if you don't live in the city and it's a heat wave, you just get in your car and go wherever you want. But in Manhattan, if it's hot, you still have to go outside. There's really no, I mean, some people have cars, but the number is relative number, percentage is very small. So you always have to go outside to get food and things like that. So yeah. Anyway, we're
well,
used to
a little different in Orlando, Florida. We drive everywhere.
it.
So,
Exactly. Right. I think that might have been why I was thinking about it when we talked about it the other day. So
yeah,
yeah,
exactly.
yeah.
Well, I want to get started. Want to find out a little more about you and Your Boulder. One of the things I thought was really interesting was your post about your Clean Breeches memoir project. So I didn't know if you want to talk about that a little before we get into the Your Boulder side, but would love to hear
Absolutely.
your
Yeah.
thoughts on that.
So that's actually an interesting project. I mean, that technically falls. I have two companies, What's Your Boulder, and also have a design studio called RLD Group. And I run both, and I manage both, and I do most of the work for both. So the Clean Breeches book technically falls under the auspices of the design studio, but it is absolutely a project that could have fallen under the auspices of What's Your Boulder. So it's a hybrid project. So I was referred to a woman whose grandfather had written a first person memoir post World War One, and there are not a lot of but there are not a lot of first person memoirs that were written and or not published. It's never been published, and obviously he's not alive. It's her grandfather's. He's not alive anymore, but he had typewritten, not handwritten, typewritten this memoir, and over time she had transcribed it and put it to Word. And now she wanted to publish it as a book, and it's something she had no understanding of, not that she had no way of knowing how to do it, how to find which pictures to include. She has so much information. So we worked together for over about a year. It took from beginning to end of figuring out, first of all, the best way to format the book. Again, being a graphic designer, so in this case, I'm actually doing the actual work of publishing the book with her, which we did on Amazon using the Amazon KDP program. So it's an actual book, printed. It's not a Kindle. You can buy it on Amazon. And over the year, we
Nice.
created the book. We went through all of her photographs. There are thousands of photographs. So I would go to her apartment. She happens to live near me, but would go anyway. And we went through all the photos, found which photos were the most relevant, talked with her family members to get identification of the photos. And the story is mostly about her grandfather coming. He came from Romania. It's Jewish, landed in New York, ended up fighting in a battle called the Meuse-Argonne, which I had never heard of. I'm not a World War One aficionado, but apparently it was the bloodiest war in World War One. So it's a very famous war. If if you follow such things, there's even a Facebook page I found for the Meuse-Argonne. So he survived, obviously came back and became a very successful dentist and so on and so forth. And actually, she's a dentist as well. So there's a whole family legacy with that. And it was an amazing experience. I loved it. And now actually, she's working with someone who's helping her shop the book around to either be republished through a traditional publisher or even be turned into a movie or a television series because it's a really, really interesting story. And I did all the editing. The original plan was to sort of leave it unedited. He wrote it. He wasn't uneducated. He wasn't formally educated, so it was written in his own sort of voice. But over time, we smoothed out some of the rough edges together. Proofread it many times. Just to make sure that it made sense. And we left it, we had and there's a note in the postscript that we left. So there's errors that are sort of intentionally left behind, like some of his language, but we fixed things like open and close quotes that were missing and making things consistent with he had a lot of Yiddish words, which we had put in, and we made sure those were all italicized and so forth. So it's a fascinating book. It's 500 pages.
Wow.
Yeah, which is a hefty book for
It is.
anybody to write by typewriter. I had pushed for publishing the typewritten pages in their original format. That didn't that we did an experiment with that, and it was too big. It was 8.5 by 11, so we ended up using the computerized version. But it's a great book, and it's called Clean Breeches. Spelled Clean, and then breeches, Breeches. And there's a little website that just directs to the Amazon page if anybody's interested in learning more about it. So it's a really good book. If you're
Oh, how
especially, and
cool.
even if you're not interested in World War, it doesn't only focus on World War I. It focus on his experience as a refugee and settling in New York in the turn of the century and so on. So it's a great book. Yeah.
Well, it sounds phenomenal. I'm gonna
Such
have
a
to
great project. I
check
mean,
it out.
I've done projects like that before where I've worked together with people on their memoirs, and it's always a lot of fun. It's emotional because obviously this is her grandfather, but he wrote this book for her to publish. That was like his reason for writing the book, and so I've done other books like that. And it's really fun. So
Oh,
great.
what a cool story. That's very cool.
Yeah, yeah,
Well, let's talk about what your Boulder a little more. I
yeah.
know you focus on implementation over strategy. Can you talk a little bit about what your day-to-day life is like?
Oh my goodness, where do I begin? Just kidding. So, well, just to go back just one step, just because it's relevant to the answer to your question, is that I've had this design studio for a long time, 26 years now, and I officially started out, I wanted to be a graphic designer even when I was in high school, which is a long time ago, and eventually started my design studio through, had different jobs and so on. And I found that having been a business owner for so many years prior to even starting my design studio, that I was always helping my clients with a lot of other things that were not falling under the umbrella of design. A typical designer just does design, like making business cards or websites or whatever, but I was always helping them start their businesses and, get their businesses moving forward or doing whatever it was that did not fall under the umbrella of being a designer. On top of which, I'm also very sort of focused, kind of get things done type of person. People used to call me the go-to gal. I put the kibosh on that because it sounds like a secretary, but that is like my reputation. So I was like, okay, I'm going to combine my ability to get stuff done with this experience that I have of, helping my clients get stuff done for their businesses. And I had thought about making it part of my design practice, but it was too complicated to sort of sell two completely different set of services to effectively the same, universe of people. I liken it to sort of selling like an Infiniti and a Toyota in the same showroom. They're manufactured by the same company, but they're different cars. So people go into the showroom looking for something very specific. And not to mention that they're different rates because design is commoditized and my rate is X, and what I do as a consultant is not commoditized, so the rate is higher.
Sure.
So anyway, a couple of years ago, I had already trademarked the What's Your Boulder concept as something that I wanted to help people do either in their personal or business lives. I hadn't just realized it was the name of my company. It was something I was already sort of manifesting, and I had gone through the trademark process prior to even deciding it was the name of my company. So when I was sort of like, well, I should split my company into two people or two pieces. I'm still the same person. What should I call it? Oh, I have this name. What's Your Boulder? I actually had the domain name too. It was all, kismet at that point. And so then I renamed the design studio as RLD Group, the design studio, and then What's Your Boulder, the implementation studio. So to answer your question, I'm doing what I've always done, which is to help people get stuff done. So if it's design work, they hand me a project, they just need to get it taken care of. And one of my clients, which I have quoted on my What's Your Boulder site, says, "I wish everybody had a Sharon. She just hands me stuff and I get it done." And
Yeah,
that is really what I'm like, even amongst my friends, like again, and like call Sharon, she'll take care of it, which is sometimes it's a blessing and a curse. I don't always want to, and I've had to over as I've gotten older and busier and so on, I've had to even be stricter, like in my personal life. Like I can't do everything for everybody. That doesn't pay the rent. But
that's
people,
the price you pay for excellence.
yeah,
If
I
you're
suppose.
getting
I mean,
taken
I'm not unhappy that that's my reputation. It's just not. I need to monetize it. That really is what comes down to. I live in New York City, and also I should, get paid for my expertise. I don't think
oh,
anyone has a problem with that. Um, so, um, so some of the work that I do for, is sort of wearing my What's Your Boulder hat is for my existing clients, and then more and more, which is, really what my end game is I'm doing it for new clients. And so a lot of times people come to me, they have a business idea. This is a very typical scenario. So someone's come from corporate, or they have another company, or they've had a job, or they've had kids and now they want to start a business and they have no idea what it takes to start and run a business. It's not easy. And you can learn. I learned it, but I learned it over decades. So not everybody wants to take decades to learn how to bootstrap a company or how to, all the different bits and pieces that go into creating, a business, who your clients should be, how to reach them, and all that kind of stuff. So oftentimes it's sort of a sprint model. I'm working with two clients right now on basically what I call an implementation sprint. They've assigned, they've said, I want to start this company. it should do this, and now what do I do? That's basically all the information I have, you know? So oftentimes it's like, well, the first thing is you have a domain name and you have your company name trademark. I feel very strongly that those are two important first steps, because the domain name doesn't take a long time, but trademarking or registering your company name does. If you're going to put, tens of thousands of dollars of time and effort, and your time and your effort, not only mine, into building a business, you should make sure it's protected. So I don't feel like everything has to be trademarked, but you should, if you have a company name that's unique, you should go ahead and do that. I'm not a lawyer, so I refer them, to
Mhm.
here in New York, like particularly a trademark attorney I work with. Not everybody does it. That's up to them. I'm just here to, tell the people what to do. They don't have to take my advice. But basically, what I do in this particular scenario is I take everything off the person's plate who I'm working with, the client's plate. So it doesn't mean that they're not involved. Like, I assign tasks back to them. So I'm both acting as a project manager, because obviously, I mean, someone could theoretically pay me to do 100% of the work and just sort of go away for a year and come back and have the business built. That's not really a realistic scenario, mostly because people want to be involved, and I also usually need their input. But I will do as much as the person wants me to do. So it varies. Like, some clients, I'm doing 90% of the heavy lifting, and sometimes it's 50%. Some of it's based upon the person's ability to pay for my time, and some of it is just their interest. If someone's already doing another job and they're starting this as a side hustle, so starting a business is effectively a side hustle, then they might give me more, or I might assign myself more tasks. Usually I'm the person who generates all the to-dos, because if they could generate the to-dos, then they would probably figure out how to do them themselves, and whatever. So could be anything from like 50 things. In the case of this particular client I'm working with now, it actually is an existing client. We had a conversation that had nothing to do with anything, and it came up that she had wanted to start this business for a long time. And it happened to be completely up my alley of what I could help her with. It's still in the very early stages, so I'm not going to talk about it specifically, but it was a random coincidence. We were having a call about her current business. And, she's like, "Oh, I've always wanted to do this." I was like, "Really? I can help you." And now yesterday we had our kickoff call. We have a whole list, everything from trademarking the name to getting her email set up to figuring out so now we're doing competitive research, go to market, pricing structure, the website, all the logo. So in this case, it's a hybrid, because I'm going to do the design work as well as all the implementation work. And
Oh,
she's busy.
nice.
Yeah, she's running her company, she's got kids, etc. So I'm assigning as little as I can to her, because that's what she wants. That's what my client said. I wish everyone had a Sharon, because they know that everything's being taken care of. They don't have to think about, well, did Sharon do this? Of course, I mean, I'm a human, I can forget things, but I'm very organized with my Google Sheets, and I'm checking in with them all the time. And if there's something I need, I basically said, don't think about anything that's not on your list, which right now is for her just to think about her perfect client for this business, a service business, and I'm taking care of everything else. If I need anything from you, like a code from Google or a credit card, I will come to you and get that from you. And the main difference,
Awesome.
just to go back to your original question, the main difference is that typically consultants, of course, there are other people who do similar type of work that I do, will assign all the tasks back to the client and says, okay, now you go and
Right.
take care of all these things. And that's not the model that I'm after. I actually recently, it's not really such a genius thing to have said, but I just said to someone who I was connecting with on LinkedIn, asked me what I did, blah, blah, blah. And I said, I've turned the consulting model on its head. And that is how I feel about it. So not everybody has the resources to pay me to do all the work. Not everybody wants to turn over the keys to the car, or the keys to the house, whatever, to somebody else, because that they want to do the work. That's fine. And that's why sometimes it can be a hybrid, whether the budgets are limited and so on. So I'm working a lot with startups. Sometimes startups are limited in their resources, meaning that they don't have the money to pay. So that is something that is a factor in how much they can afford to hire me. But that's not that's not, there are plenty of people. I'm only one person. I don't need 4,000 clients. And sometimes I'm working with, high net worth clients who have unlimited resources, and then 10,000 projects going around in their head that they just sort of spit out and want things taken care of on a whim, and I'll just take care of it. They don't need to know the details of it, so sort of like a super high level, what you call it, chief of staff, fractional chief of staff kind of thing. So it varies. And then, yeah.
Yeah, that's great that you can customize your approach based on the client needs. And obviously that's very desirable from the client standpoint. Let
Yeah.
me ask you this. Are you seeing any trends in the boulders that you're attacking? Are there any boulders that seem to be common across numerous clients?
Oh, that's such a great question. I mean, I guess like there's the macro trend is that a lot of people want to start businesses, which is not something that people would have been able to do or even contemplate. I've been doing it just not out of necessity, but something I sort of fell into, at the beginning of my career and decided this was for me. But now it's pretty easy with AI.
Mhm.
And AI is obviously like one new thing, right? By the way, I know my video is weird. There's nothing I can do about it. It's a computer thing. I mean, there's not nothing. I buy a new computer. Sorry. So a boulder of mine. Anyway, so I think that one thing that is really current is that people get very overwhelmed. Like they can generate. I have this problem with AI too. So people will go in to talk to their, AI of choice. I have a client like this, and she's generating like volumes of paper on how to, organize her business. But first of all, no human being can even. That's why a computer generated it. So no human being can like ingest all that information. I mean,
Mhm.
not without spending 24/7. So people are sort of over generating ideas, and starting a business is complex, but it's also simple. There's a lot of things you simply need to do. And there are I'm a huge proponent of AI. I use it for everything. And in my proposal, for instance, with this woman I was talking about before, I literally put this will be done with AI, not literally, but I said AI, because I don't want her to think I'm going to generate all her competitive research manually. Nobody would do that today, right? But I want to be clear with her and she's fine with that. But I want, she maybe said, no, I want you to hire a competitive research firm and do it the old way. Well, that would be fine. I would do that, but that's not how I was doing it. So yeah, so I think the main thing is that people are having all these ideas, and then they're like, "Well, now what? How do I bring this idea to life?" And I'm there to sort of wrangle them, and also I have another philosophy which I'll throw in here besides what you're both are called friction free, and it's sort of like a keep it simple, stupid philosophy, which is that there are a million ways to do a million different things, but they're not all necessary. You don't need to try every single thing. Just pick a path, pick a lane, and just do it. And if you have good instincts and you are, thoughtful about how you do things, you'll probably get to a good endpoint. Doesn't mean the first thing you try will necessarily be the final thing, but you don't need to try 1,000 things. And I think AI has a tendency to kind of, throwing you into option paralysis. I know it does me. And option paralysis is the enemy of getting stuff done, right? Obviously, if you're stuck because you're too many things to decide between, then you're like, well, what do I choose first? Just choose something. Trust your instincts and choose something. So that's a little bit of a
Well,
tangent, but AI I think is a boulder. And then just start, like I said, just starting businesses. I mean, I love working with people on starting their businesses, so that's so much fun for me.
oh,
Um,
yeah.
yeah,
There's a lot to do when you start a business, that's for
so
sure.
much. Yeah.
Definitely overwhelming, but
Yeah.
that's a good segue for my next question. Obviously, my company, Smart AI, focuses on AI implementations, and we generally find kind of a landing spot where we can implement AI. We focus a lot on the front end on lead generation. And then we tend to grow relationships from there. As the client sees the success of utilizing AI to bring in qualified leads and actually act as an SDR, make appointments, they they start to see the value of replacing manual processes and things that aren't truly serving the customer directly and improving their brand.
Mhm.
Those things that can be passed off to AI, we can sequence those in. How do you approach that with your clients? Since one of the boulders is AI does so much, how do I do it? What tools do I pick? And how do I get this implemented? How do you approach that?
Yeah, I mean, so regarding AI, I mean, I teach a class, I offer a class called AI FOMO NOMO at aifomonomo.com. And it's basically like AI for dummies. That's a trademark term, and I don't like the term anyway, but it is basically meant for anybody who is just totally afraid of where to start. That doesn't mean they haven't like dabbled in, ChatGPT, but really what it's about. And the reason I'm bringing that up, besides self advertising, is to say that I feel like it's really important for people to understand how AI works and how to use it rather than worry about what tool to use. That's actually the idea of how I came up with the class is people like, well, what should I use? Should I use ChatGPT, Claude, blah, blah. It's like, don't worry about it. Learn how to do prompting just a very simple and very important example. Like if you can become an expert at prompting, you will get it's a garbage in, garbage out situation, right? We all learn about that when we learn about programming and everything or whatever. So you need to understand how to do prompting. So I am working with my clients to, everyone at this point who I work with is certainly everyone on the planet is able to type in a prompt and get information, back from your AI of choice. But that doesn't mean it's going to be the right response. So for everybody, it's a matter of figuring out what the right tool is. Of course, if you're using like lead gen, then it's a specific tool to what type of lead gen you're looking for. I have a client right now I'm working with, they're a realtor in California, and they don't show up in AI at all, literally. And they do a niche type of real estate. And so we're literally redoing their entire site to make sure that they are cited in AI. Obviously, like it's super important because obviously I know it's not lead gen specifically, but in the case of their lead gen, nobody's using Google anymore to like look for a realtor that
That's
does
right.
X or Y, right? So when you search for them or you ask questions that pertain to their type of real estate, they don't show up at all, which is
Oh,
terrifying for them. Even though it's not that shocking because AI has been like in the universe for like a year at this point, right? So it's not like it's 20. I have other clients like if someone hasn't shown up in SEO in traditional SEO in 20 years down the line, I'd be worried. But we're talking about year one of AI or AI, what we call it now, AEO. I don't know why they left out the I, but AEO, right? AISEO. So they're having to go through and they're doing a whole analysis of what they're doing it themselves. In this particular case, they have a person who can do it, researching all of their competitors, what they show up in, how they show up, all the citations, etc. So does that answer your question? So yeah, I think it does.
yeah,
So yeah, I
absolutely.
mean, it's a powerful tool. So whether you're using, a lead gen program,
Um, well, let me ask you this: where do founders get AI wrong? Where do they go wrong when you come in and seeing what founders have tried and not succeeded at implementing AI? What are you saying on the downside of what people are doing that they shouldn't be doing?
I think there's two sides to that. So one is not using it enough. I mean, my thing in my AI class, besides saying use it, learn about prompting, is use it for everything. Like there's nothing that you shouldn't at least attempt to use AI for at this point, and when it comes to business. So whether that's more competitive research, lead gen. I mean, I take all like the proposal, the project I was talking about earlier that I'm working on with the woman starting her company. I wrote effectively like a 2-page proposal, which by the way was written for me by Claude based on our phone conversation. So I took my phone conversation. I use Granola, so it's just a transcript. I took the transcript, put it in Claude, which I like the way that Claude proposals look better. I use ChatGPT and Claude. It spit out the proposal. Of course, I, edited it. And actually, sometimes I edit it with ChatGPT to kind of get a different, he said, she said situation. And then when after it was approved, I took the proposal, put it back into ChatGPT, and it created this massive project management document for me in Sheets. It's like 10 tabs, and it's something I mean, I could have done it, but it would have taken me a week.
Right.
And it would have been a big waste of my time. Now it's a little bit like the AI is kind of overthink a bunch, right? Because the computer, so it only took like 2 minutes for it to do it. So I guess it's like, well, why not? I'll just throw out the kitchen sink here. But I had to go through and edit it and delete things and reorder, but it was basically finished. So number one is AI is your friend. I don't think there's any stigma at this point attached with using AI for everything, or for anything. And if you should always at least try. So I use it for all of my note taking, which is a game changer. I take my notes, I share them with my chat. GPT, which is my main one. I also share it with Bordy. I don't know if you're familiar with Bordy.ai. So I share it with Bordy, who helps me with my business development outreach and so on. I was going to say I just lost my train of thought. I forgot what I was going to say. So yeah, using it for everything, but then also I know what I was going to say, making sure that it is authentic. So if you are using AI for everything or anything, that's fine. I do, but you don't want to just like then send that email that you've had the ChatGPT or whomever create for you and just send it because it doesn't sound authentic. It doesn't sound like you. I mean, over time, yes, I understand they're getting better in general. They learn your voice and everything, but still like it leaves out things that the way that I talk is not the way that ChatGPT talks. I'm a
I've
human.
learned to do
I have
that
a very
too.
casual way of writing. I just have a specific style. I think I'm a good writer and so on. So I always edit. When I'm writing an email to like, I wrote an email to my insurance company complaining about something. I don't edit that email. I don't care what that sounds like, as long as it's getting my point across. But if I'm writing to a client or a prospect or something, I do really be careful. I'm really careful about how it sounds, because otherwise it just sounds like you're cheating, and I don't really want to be perceived as that I'm cheating. So
Sure.
it
Sure.
has to be authentic. But I mean, basically everybody should be using it for absolutely everything. I even when I catch myself typing something into my browser bar now as a search, I'm like, what are you doing? It doesn't make any sense because in ChatGPT, all of my searches are saved, all the results are saved, all it knows everything about me. I mean, it's so much more efficient. It's such a better tool. No, I mean, obviously Google doesn't care that I'm saying this anyway, but sorry, Google. But obviously they have like they have their own AI tool. Like they probably don't care anyway, even if it's like fewer people doing searches.
Exactly.
But
Exactly.
people to actually go back to what I said before, it's critical that people make sure that their sites, if they're dependent on any inbound, organic inbound traffic, they have to make sure that their sites are findable and authentic and correct. And it's probably they will find that they're not. I mean, even my site, which I never specifically did that, but I do have a pretty good site. Even that requires tweaking to make sure that your site is showing up with the results that you want. And even yourself, like you should, just like you used to be supposed to Google yourself, you should
Mhm.
also chat GPT yourself. I do it in Claude and Gemini to make sure I have a unique name. So that's good because there are not a lot of other people showing up under my name. But if your name isn't as unique, you need to make sure that it's finding you correctly, pointing them to your correct LinkedIn, all that kind of stuff. You have to protect your brand on all levels, your personal brand and your business's brand. Super important. Um,
Well, last question for you. What's your goal for What's Your Boulder over the next year to 2 years? Where do you see yourself?
yeah, so my goal is to, grow my business, of course, because that's why one is in business. Continue to work on super interesting projects. I'd like to work on projects while I love working with startups. I also really would like to find more opportunities to work in existing companies where I'm trying to unravel existing problems because that's just a different set of challenges. And that's harder in terms of business development for me to find those kind of clients. But once I'm involved in companies like that, I'm often, become a really great resource. We didn't really get to talk about my background, but my background is in tech. And so I'm very much very, very tech savvy, but also very much a layperson. So I'm unusually sort of able to work across with a lot of people within a company. And that's another sort of superpower that I have. I'm a generalist, but my generalist is sort of like tech and creative and everything sort of in between, which is not a lot of people. So
That's
I
a great
really love
combination.
working. What?
It's a great combination.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I know it is, and I'm happy that it is. Like I used to not, well, I'm like, oh, I'm such a geek, but now I don't care. Like now I'm wearing my cape, and I didn't like being a generalist either before that. It's a whole other topic of conversation. It's very hard to be a generalist. It was. It's sort of now becoming more acceptable. But anyway, so to answer your question, I would love to work within bigger organizations because just, projects. One thing I love working on the startups because there's like 8 million deliverables. But on the other hand, if you work within a company setting or you're working in a bigger company, there might be one sort of meaty deliverable, which is just a different type of challenge to solve a problem. It might take one problem to solve over time. I really like working with other people. When I'm working with startups, it's often me and the founder. Obviously, not a lot of other people, or maybe a co-founder, whatever. But when you're working in a corporate setting, you're working with obviously a lot of other people within the company. I really love working along the entire hierarchy in a company. It's something I also really pride myself on being able to do. So working at the C level, but then also kind of working my way down the totem pole and being able to communicate with everybody on their level, so to speak. So that's a challenge for me because those are harder, opportunities to get. I'm not as ensconced in that world. I'm more in the founder startup world. But I'm working on, doing that through getting more involved with VCs. I'm a venture scout for two VCs. So those are still startups, but those have different opportunities and so on. So yeah.
Very cool. Very cool. Well, listen, thank you so much for your time. It's been a great
Welcome.
conversation. Really appreciate you joining us today and appreciate all your insights and hearing about your experience. And best of luck to you moving forward
Thank you.
with
You
what you're
too.
older. And have a great week.
All right. Thanks. You too. It's great talking to you. Bye.